Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Industrial Equipment News and Manufacturing.net. Welcome to our presentation on one of U.S. manufacturing's most powerful, yet potentially underutilized assets. The Export-Import Bank of the United States is the official export credit agency of the United States. EXIM is an independent executive branch agency tasked with supporting American jobs by facilitating the export of U.S. goods and services. So when private sector lenders are unable or unwilling to provide financing, EXIM fills the gap by providing resources that allow U.S. manufacturers to better compete against foreign competition in overseas markets. Manufacturers can create more, better paying jobs for Americans. Because it's backed by the U.S., EXIM is able to assume some risks that the private sector would not. Despite this dynamic, EXIM consistently maintains a low default rate. With me today to talk a little more about EXIM, global supply chain trends, and some of the challenges facing U.S. manufacturers looking to grow their exports is Steve Renna, EXIM's Chief Banking Officer. Steve oversees the trade financing solutions that EXIM offers and helps direct the Office of Small Business Finance. As a member of the senior leadership team, he works closely with the EXIM Board of Directors to best position the bank in expanding the financing of export opportunities for U.S. manufacturers. All right, so Steve, maybe we can start with talking about some of the day-to-day functions of EXIM and how those things really tie into the bigger picture goals of what the bank is trying to accomplish.
Sure. Well, first thing I'd say, let me describe the bigger picture goals of the bank by basically describing its mission. The EXIM Bank exists to support U.S. jobs by facilitating U.S. exports. So the way that we facilitate U.S. exports is to provide a financing solution. So when you have a U.S. export, you have three parties involved. You have the exporter itself, you have the foreign buyer, and you often have the foreign buyer's bank. And in most situations, when we are directly dealing with providing a financial solution to an export to a foreign buyer, there is a credit issue. The foreign buyer is not able to get financing from the commercial marketplace. So EXIM comes in and provides a guarantee to the foreign buyer's lender that says, if the foreign buyer does not pay you back on a loan that you make to it, EXIM will. And that allows the foreign buyer to get commercially reasonable terms for a loan from its bank, so it can then make the purchase of goods or services from the U.S. exporter. So that's the role we play to facilitate the transaction ultimately happening by providing a financing solution that is missing from the calculus. And with that financing solution, the calculus can then be solved for X, the transaction goes forward, and U.S. jobs are supported because of that export sale. So now you're asking, what do we do on a day-to-day basis? Well, at the EXIM Bank, we have a number of different types of export products, basically different ways in which we can support the exporting transaction. In some ways, we are focused on the exporter itself, and those are situations where the exporter has a foreign buyer that actually the foreign buyer doesn't need a financing solution. The exporter, in order to complete its sale to the foreign buyer, it needs support itself. So it needs support in the form of working capital, or it needs an insurance policy that says if the exporter is going to sell its products to foreign buyer, it's facing payment risk. What happens if that foreign buyer doesn't pay me? I can't, as the exporter, go to country X, try to work through their legal system to get my payment. So instead, they buy an insurance policy from the EXIM Bank that says, if you're not paid by the foreign buyer, we will pay you. So there are a number of different types of products that we provide, and on a day-to-day basis, we're talking to clients, potential clients of all sizes in all different types of transactions. As I said, it could be domestically where you're focusing on credit insurance or working capital loans, or with respect to foreign buyers, we're providing a guarantee to the foreign buyer's bank in order to make the transaction go through, or also we can provide direct loans to foreign buyers. This is often done in the case of project financing. So it's pretty varied. We try to be able to be as bespoke as possible to as many different types of exporter and foreign buyer solution needs that they have.
Interesting. So, Steve, lending a little bit from that experience and that view of things, we're going to buck a media trend and sort of put COVID to the side for a second. We'll talk about that in a minute. But from your perspective and looking at the things that you do day to day, what do you see as some of the bigger trends that are really impacting manufacturing supply chains right now? And maybe more specifically, the exporting functions that they're trying to carry out?
So we're setting aside COVID
Yeah.
circumstances, just normally what we see. It's basically just a capacity issues of the trade finance industry commercially. That's what exporters are facing. Is there financing for my transaction? Is there insurance available against payment risk for me? Do I have working capital? I mean, that's basically what the supply chain is facing, because if the exporter has these financing solutions available to it, then the supply chain to those exporters is going to be taken care of, because you've got that not only volume but velocity to transactions that are happening in the exporting side of the equation. And that's how the supply chain is going to be best served, is that the exporters they're supporting are not being inhibited in any way or have impediments with respect to trade finance.
Okay, so we can't avoid talking about it. The elephant in the room, so to speak, is COVID-19. What are some of the impacts that you've seen it have, and maybe what are some of the things that EXIM Bank is doing in response to it?
Yeah, well, it's kind of staged, it's complicated, but the first thing that we found was the need to address was the supply chain of U.S. exporters right off the bat, because as we all know, when the COVID virus basically shut down the economies, a lot of bank credit evaporated. Banks basically pulled back from the normal credit that they would provide to their clients. And in addition to that, there wasn't the flow of revenue either, that whether it's in the supply chain or in the exporter side of the equation, because there weren't as many transactions being done. So the first thing we saw from that pullback were the fact that the exporters' suppliers were facing kind of a dual pinch. They were facing the dual pinch of not having their own revenue, or having their own revenue significantly diminished, and their availability to the capital markets was also diminished. They essentially couldn't get working lines of credit. So we had heard from the exporters that they needed help with supply chain financing. Supply chain financing is a facility a bank would set up that we can provide a guarantee to that facility that would allow suppliers to an exporter to present their accounts receivable directly to the bank, not having to wait the payment terms that they may have with the exporter, say 30, 60, 90 days, but be able to take their account receivable, present it directly to the bank for payment at a discounted amount, but largely be able to get their account receivable fulfilled immediately. Because not only was the cash important to the supply chain, but how quickly you can get cash into that supply chain. So that was one important feature that we immediately stepped into an availability breach for. And secondly was working capital itself. Again, banks pulled back from providing credit to exporters who still had orders they could fulfill, but needed capital in order to actually create the products that they ultimately were going to export. When those lines of credit pulled back, they were in need of EXIM to come in and provide a guarantee to the banks on behalf of the exporter, so they can get working capital loans made to them so they can fill the export orders that they had. Now, what we haven't seen much of, but I expect that we do, is as the world economy emerges out of the COVID economic lockdowns, as we're starting to see that, you're going to get foreign buyers more in a position to start executing on the purchase of U.S. exports. When that happens, they're very likely going to find that credit availability is going to be very constrained for that. So we have set up a couple of products that will allow EXIM to be filling that credit availability gap that the private sector is going to be has left. We'll be providing that filler to that gap until the private sector can re-enter that marketplace. We're going to do it in two ways. One is to essentially provide bridge financing. So we'll say to a foreign buyer wants to buy goods from the United States, can't get a bank to provide credit for it. We can provide a bridge loan until there is the availability in the private capital market to provide them the financing they need and take that bridge loan out. And lastly, the other product is for large capital goods like aircraft and satellites and rail cars and locomotives, things like that, that it's required of the U.S. exporter that when an order is placed for, say, an aircraft or one of these other large capital goods, there have to be progress payments that are made throughout the manufacturing process. Again, because the capital markets have retrenched, we anticipate that foreign buyers who want to place these orders for large capital goods may find that their credit availability to make these progress payments is not there. So we will provide that type of financing as well.
Interesting. You mentioned a lot of the dynamics and a lot of tools and support around working capital, which is vital regardless of industry, regardless of company size. And obviously one of the big goals of EXIM is to help U.S. manufacturing be as competitive as possible. Are there some other programs or services that you look to provide or make people more aware of as companies look to increase their exporting opportunities right now?
I think I would look at it this way. Our products are generally along the categories that I've already mentioned. Credit insurance, working capital loans, supply chain financing, guarantees to the lenders of foreign banks, project financing. Those are generally what our buckets are of what we work in. It really, though, to figure out which of these categories is best for an exporter or a foreign buyer really requires the exporter come and talk with us. And we'll work with them, understand their fact situation, and figure out what is the right product for them.
Absolutely. And one of the things that plays a key part in making those decisions from a manufacturer's perspective is trusting the individuals they're working for. What are some things that you might be able to tell our audience when they're wanting to understand, why should I trust EXIM Bank? How do I know that they're really on my side and that they're worth kind of the time and resources that are going to be necessary to really make this partnership work?
Right. Well, that's an excellent question. And again, I'll first go back to what our mission is. We exist to support U.S. jobs that are maintained by exports. So that's what our goal is. Secondly, why should you trust us? Well, one, I think everyone should understand we operate under strict client confidentiality. We cannot share any of the information that we get from a client or a potential client with anyone else in the public eye. We can share this information within government on an as need to know basis, but everyone in government is subject to the same client confidentiality requirements. So I certainly understand if you're a business out there, you're like, really? The government wants to help me, they tax me, they regulate me. Why do I want to go to the government and basically start disclosing my financial statements and things like that? Do I really want to be talking to the government about that. And I think that's an important element of trust that businesses need to have. But will say that because of our client confidentiality, and because of our mission, and because our many decades of operation, where we could provide many testimonials of clients of how we've worked well with them and in a very trusted way, that they should trust us because we are on your side. And we want to help you in your export business model. We want to help make it work for you.
Absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit, right now, in light of current events, there's a lot of businesses, including manufacturers, who are really coming under scrutiny, and I think rightfully so, in terms of how they work with minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses. So maybe you can offer a little perspective on some of the things that EXIM does to support these types of enterprises.
Yes, thank you for raising that question. One of the things I want to generally say about EXIM Bank is that there is no deal too large for us and there is no deal too small for us. Our mandate is to serve all the exporter community from the smallest to the largest. As a matter of fact, a significant part of EXIM's programming is focusing on smaller exporters that basically are don't have yet enough of a track record to be able to perhaps access working capital or export credit insurance from the private sector markets without EXIM support. So we provide also then to fill a gap where the private sector is not willing to serve. So we're focused significantly to make sure that not only small business, but the smallest of small business are going to have access to the tools that they need in order to export. Secondly, with respect to minority and women-owned business, we are very much trying to crowd that community into what EXIM does. We have a special department within our Office of Small Business on minority and women-owned businesses. Our goal is to provide outreach to those businesses and communities around the country so they understand how EXIM can help them and how they can access EXIM to get the help that we can provide. In addition to that, we partner with the Commerce Department because the Commerce Department also has a mission of minority business development. And so we're able to use the multiplier effect of a much larger agency and a much larger program to help our outreach initiatives in the minority and women-owned business sector.
Steve, one of the biggest challenges for U.S. manufacturers when they're looking to export and compete in foreign markets is the influence of China. How is EXIM responding to that dynamic?
When we were reauthorized in December of 2019, our reauthorization statutory language included an additional mandate. And that additional mandate said that EXIM is to lean in on behalf of U.S. companies that are competing directly against China. And as we all know, China does not play on a fair, level, and transparent playing field like the United States companies do and many companies around the world. China subsidizes its companies from a pricing standpoint, and China also provides below market financing solutions for potential buyers of products from its companies. So this has created a very unlevel playing field. Congress and the administration recognize that and know that financing for an exporter's competitive bid, U.S. exporter's competitive bid, is critical to their overall competitiveness. So we have been given a mandate in our new charter to lean in to help U.S. companies compete against China, and if necessary, even match the terms that China is providing its companies in a competition. We are working on how we implement doing that We're moving forward on policies that will allow us to be able to execute in a consistent way with respect to that. But this is obviously a very important mandate that Congress and the administration have given us. It's an important overall goal for our country. China, obviously, as everyone knows, is our number one commercial competitor out there. And as everyone also knows, we've seen the way China chooses to compete, and it's win at any cost. That's their motto for how they compete. And we need to have an answer to that. And EXIM is part of this administration's overall solution to figure out how we can level the playing field better vis-a-vis China, particularly to suppliers in the supply chain of exporters. In order for them to take advantage of supply chain finance, which is very important to them right now, they do need their exporter that they're supplying to set up a supply chain finance facility with its bank. So I would encourage suppliers to encourage their exporters to create these supply chain finance facilities if they don't already have one.
Excellent. Very important stuff to put out there. Steve, before we wrap up, are there any other closing thoughts you'd like to share today?
Well, I think if anyone has any doubts or questions as to whether EXIM can help them, we encourage you to call and ask us. I think sometimes the biggest limitation on how much business EXIM can do in supporting U.S. exporters is the limitation is basically companies not knowing about us, not knowing what we can do for them, and not feeling sure how they can access us. We have all sorts of contact information available on our website, and our website also includes a lot of very user-friendly how-to information. We welcome hearing from anyone that's looking for or even thinks, not even sure if they need an export financing solution, but call us and we want to be able to help. That's it. And outreach, we're a small agency, limited resources in what we can do. We can't take ads out on TV. We don't have that type of information. So we're just trying to reach as many people as possible and informing them about what we can do and certainly encouraging them to contact us and talk with us about that.
Great information, Steve, and thanks so much for joining us today. For more information on how EXIM can help you grow your business, go to exim.gov. For Steve Renna and EXIM Bank, I'm Jeff Ranke. Thanks for watching and have a great day.